Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Kawanati. Today I'm back with another batch of 5 books, attempting to catch up on all the things I read in January that I still need to talk about. So let's get into it. The first one is Embers of War by Gareth L. Powell. This book actually came highly recommended from Elizabeth at Books and Pieces, and she was right. This was very good. And it is also the first in what I think is going to be a trilogy, and I would call it space opera. So this takes place in the far future. Humanity is in other solar systems throughout the galaxy, has made contact with other species and stuff, and it takes place some years after a really terrible war between 2 major human factions, which ended with the genocide of a sentient forest on another planet and a final showdown that ended the war because it was just like a terrible atrocity. The story is told from the viewpoints of some major characters who all lived through that war on one side or the other and are now trying to live their lives, maybe making up for some of the things they did. The first is Sal Constans. She is the captain of the sentient AI warship, the Trouble Dog, which fought during the war and then just walked away from its purpose and joined the House of Reclamation. So Sal Constans and the Trouble Dog and their crew, they all work for the House of Reclamation, which is kind of a neutral party that rescues people, finds lost ships, and is allowed to go pretty much anywhere because it will help everybody. Sal Constans and the Trouble Dog are called in to help a ship called the Hobo, where something strange happened to it. While trying to rescue some of the crew members, Sal loses one of her own crew members, and then after returning to the House of Reclamation, she is sent off to rescue the hopefully still living passengers of this giant ship, a civilian ship that was attacked under more strange circumstances. There is also a character who is a poet. She is on that civilian ship that is attacked and is trying to survive and wait for rescue, along with a young man that she had been having an affair with on the ship. And how does she have anything to do with any of this? Maybe she is a target, maybe she is not. So it's kind of hard to explain what's going on here. I was really into it. I just found this to be very imaginative, but also kind of comforting space opera that makes sense. It reminded me, interestingly, of how I felt while reading Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky and some other space opera type books. And yeah, I'm really into it and I'm really curious what's going to happen next. It seems like there is an impending war, or people are going to start fighting over other things by the end of this book, so bad times are coming. Next up, I have A Blink of the Screen, collected shorter fiction by Terry Pratchett. This is half various miscellaneous, not related to Discworld stories, and then the second half are the Discworld short stories. The non-Discworld stories in this particular collection I wasn't that impressed by. I personally think that Pratchett is best at novel length, and particularly in the Discworld novels. Shorter stories don't seem to come that naturally to him. That being said, there was one fantastic story in this collection. It is one of the Discworld ones, The Sea and Little Fishes, that's what it's called. I blank on the name of it because the name itself doesn't seem to relate to anything that's said in the story. But this is a fantastic story about Granny Weatherwax and Nanny Ogg. It felt exactly like a self-contained chapter of a Discworld novel, if Discworld novels had chapters. It was a very satisfying story, probably especially because Granny Weatherwax is my favorite Discworld character, but like this whole collection was worth it for that one story. The other stuff was just okay. Next, I listened to a nonfiction book on audio called The Information, A History, a Theory, a Flood by James Gleick. I wanted to read this for years because I gathered it was something that Gleick was very well known for, and I really liked his biography of Richard Feynman. That was excellent, though I was a bit more so-so on his book about time travel. And The Information had some really interesting nuggets in it. It's basically about the birth of information theory and just the concept of information as we think of it today, and how we didn't really have that concept before. The first part of the book talks about things like the development of the alphabet and writing, that transition from like the oral culture to things being written down, the talking drums of Africa, and then it moves into Morse code, the telegram, the telegraph, and then the birth of information theory, which was the idea of Claude Shannon, who worked at Bell Labs and was working on basically clearing up noise from telephones and stuff. He did a lot of mathematical work on information, and that's what most of this is about. Shannon is referenced throughout most of the book in this idea of information. I thought it was a really interesting concept. I feel also like maybe this book was skewed towards one idea of information. I thought it was interesting that Gleick actually didn't talk that much about meaning and like what is the difference between data and information. Probably because so much of this is based on Shannon's work and his information theory, where he actually did subtract meaning from his mathematical work, because in the engineering problem he was working on, meaning was not the point. Everything else was. And I think that was kind of noticeable by the end of this book, where pretty much Gleick just ends talking about how we're drowning in information, we have too much of it, and we have to figure out a way of handling information, and yet he still isn't talking that much about getting meaning out of things. So I thought it was a really fascinating book, and I thought much of the information in it was really interesting, and Gleick manages to tie together a lot of disparate areas that I didn't realize had been all so affected by information theory. Genetics is the big one. Of course, I'm really into genetics, and it made so much sense to talk about it in terms of information, so I felt like it fit here, but I was rather surprised at first that that was a topic in the book. So yeah, it was a very interesting book, but I think that there were probably some things missing from it, and I'm not sure what they are because I'm not an expert in this topic by any means, but I was just rather surprised that there wasn't as much about that difference between data and being flooded with data and then getting actual meaning out of it. Next is a really fun book. This is Brazen Rebel Ladies Who Rocked the World by Penelope Bagieu, or however you pronounce that. She is French and I don't know how to pronounce her last name. This is a translated nonfiction graphic novel. I've read quite a few books on this topic, which is basically little snapshots, little biographies of women throughout time in different areas who did major work that they should be remembered for. So I've read like Rachel Ignatowski's Women in Science and Women in Sports, and I loved those. I've read Bygone Badass Bras by Mackenzie Lee and Modern Herstory by Blair Imani, and they all do something similar to this, but this is the first one that I've read that definitely has a very international feel that isn't focused on really just one particular area or industry. It's also entirely in comic form, so you still have these just very short biographies, but I feel like the visual storytelling in here actually made these women's stories feel like stories. Maybe there's a little bit of artistic license taken with the exact accuracy of some of the details, but it was just really enjoyable. It felt like reading stories rather than resumes of people, which is what I kind of criticized Modern Herstory for. So, and then there are just some women in here that I'd never heard of who have unusual job titles. My favorite one was Frances Glessner Lee, a crime miniaturist, a woman who quite late in life, when she was rich and widowed, used her time to make these highly detailed miniature recreations of crime scenes, and she used them to teach like detectives how to observe a crime scene and gather clues and such. Never heard of her or anything, and that was just such a cool thing that she did, you know? So yeah, this was really nice. The comic style itself was okay, but at the end of every woman's section, there is this like full spread illustration, and I thought these were gorgeous. They were just so bold and colorful, and really just pick these great snapshots from each of the women's lives and what they did and everything. So yeah, this one I thought was excellent, and if you're looking for something that's translated as well, there aren't many of these. And lastly, I have another comic that I really enjoyed. This is The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag. I forget where I first heard about this, but the last place I heard about it that made me go out and get it from the library is Harriet Rosie. I think she included this and its sequel on like her favorite graphic novels of 2018 list. Whatever she said about it finally made me go get it, and I'm really glad that I did. This is a middle grade graphic novel, definitely for younger readers, and it is about a boy named Aster. He comes from quite a large extended family of witches and shapeshifters. All of the men are shapeshifters who fight demons, and all of the women are witches, and they are not allowed to do what the opposite sex does. Only Aster, he knows deep down he's not a shapeshifter, he's a witch. And he's trying to learn witchcraft while everyone who catches him tells him, no, you can't do that, that's bad, it will warp you, it will twist you. However, something starts preying on his male cousins. They start to go missing, and he may be the only one who figures it out and saves the day. It was so sweet and so good. I liked the storytelling and the writing. I also really liked the artwork. It is simple, but it is also bold and colorful. It actually reminded me a lot of some of the artwork from the Lumberjane series. It made me wonder if Ostertag has ever actually done covers or issues of Lumberjanes, because just her artwork seems so familiar for some reason. It's not elaborate, it's nothing like just amazing and intricate, but it is very solid feeling, I guess is how I would describe it. I really liked both the way that this was written and the way that it looks. And I also really liked just Aster as a person. He is a little bit non-traditional as a boy, that he knows what he wants, he's crossing that boundary into what is typically like the female domain. I really liked that aspect of the story, and how eventually he is accepted in what he wants and what he knows deep down about himself. So there is a sequel. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I'm going to definitely request it from my library. And those are all the books from this batch. I think I am caught up on my backlog now. Yay! Thank you for sticking with me through so many of these mini reviews. Do let me know if you have read any of these books I talked about today and what you thought about them, and I'll be back to talk to you again in another video when my voice has recovered from talking so much in one day. And until then, happy reading!